We'll just segue right into Dennis and Damon talking about how they got started writing fanzines. And Dennis, as the senior fanzine person, we're going to let him start.
I've done fanzines almost all my life, almost since I could read. Louder?
Yeah.
Yes. Like when you think you're screaming, you're almost there.
I've done fanzines most of my life since I was about 10 years old, and I don't know why I did the things. It's kept me out of trouble. Sometimes it's gotten me into trouble. I first discovered Howard when I was 13 or 14 years old. Read Al Murick and one of the Gnome Press Conan books, and I needed more, you know. And actually, when I did the Howard review, it was almost a coin toss of whether or not to do a Bob Howard fanzine or an Edgar Rice Burroughs fanzine, because I was a big fan of both. There were already a lot of Burroughs fanzines out there, and the only other Howard fanzine at the time was Cross Plains, but I didn't even know it existed. They had done 2 or 3 issues, and it was a nice surprise because I like Cross Plains a lot. Suddenly, in 1975, there were just a lot of us, and we sort of served the same purpose that the internet serves now. So that's my story.
Was it hard to get the material at the time?
Not once you just wrote a couple of letters. It was not hard. And once you do something like that, people want to contribute to it. Artists want to give you their work, you know, for exposure. You get a lot of free material that way. Of course, we did pay for our material too. We had to pay Glenn Lord for the Howard stories, and the rates were pretty reasonable, really. And the artists charged us for their art, sometimes more than they charge pro markets. But we did pay well. Once I got in touch with Glenn, at first he was a little bit reluctant to give me anything unpublished, and he always said, well, there's really not that much stuff. And of course, after I did a couple of things, he started to get more free with the unpublished material. And Glenn, you could tell, was kind of frustrated that he couldn't still be involved in fanzines, but he was, because he was in the middle of every fanzine there was. We couldn't have done anything without Glenn. And we were just all so inspired by him. We some of us tried to be like the Howard Collector. But Amra too was a beautiful magazine. It didn't have the same kind of substance that the Howard Collector had, but it had Roy Krinkle, and it was more of a fun zine. And I was obsessed with Amra just because of the artwork. And I kind of was more inspired by Amra than the Howard Collector visually. And then Deep Pockets, Lone Star Fictioneer came along. Those guys had a lot of money. They could do more than any of the rest of us could. We just kind of struggled along, but once the stuff started to sell, actually, we didn't intend to, but in 1975 you did make money from fanzines because you published a couple thousand copies, and they would sell out in months instead of, a couple of years. Your turn.
Okay.
You talk first.
Well, I first discovered Robert E. Howard in 1972. I was actually looking for Tarzan paperbacks, and I was trying to finish up the Tarzan series. Seems like a lot of people found Howard through Burroughs. So I went to a used bookstore and was poking around, and this guy, went to the counter where the clerk was, and he asked him if he had any Tarzan books, because I didn't see any. He said nobody had something else I might like, and so he brought out a copy of Conan the Conqueror. So that was my first exposure to Howard. And so I started, trying to find everything I could find. There wasn't a lot then, too much out. It was right before the boom started. So I did contact Glenn Lord and got, some copies of the Howard Collector that he had left. And then I decided in 1975 I want to start my own fanzine, and Dennis was publishing, and you know, a lot of these other ones were, I think most of them were going, you know, were still ongoing ventures. So I contacted Dennis and the other guys and got some input from them, and actually contributions from you know, most of the fanzine editors. You know, wrote something from my early issues. So my first issue came out in the spring of 1976, and I liked Dennis. You know, I liked Amber a lot, artwork. So I always thought that Howard's work worked hand in hand with artwork, because he's so visual in his writing. So I strove to get artwork, you know, into the magazine that would complement the articles and the fiction and everything. And the biggest struggle I had with artists was dependability. You know, that's why you might see me tend to use the same artist, because I might find an artist that is real dependable, and you know, I'll keep using them. There was one guy, if you remember, David Parsons. He was in some of my early issues, and he you know, he, like, for example, issue number 3, he was supposed to do 3 illustrations for The Devil's Joker, first Robert E. Howard story I published. So the artwork, one piece of the artwork arrived, and the other 2, he said, was, you know, it must have got lost in the mail or something. So, but by the time he sent it, you know, I had to go ahead and print it, you know, with some substitute artwork. So anyway, the second time it happened was in the 4th issue. So anyway, I found out later he had a real bad drug problem, so that probably contributed to it. So needless to say, I couldn't use him. He wasn't dependable anymore. So I did use Ken Rainey a lot too, particularly with Chronicle Cross Plains #1, which came out in 1978. And then after that, I kind of stopped publishing, kind of got distracted by, you know, other things, and
Real life.
Real life, yeah.
Yes.
Real life kind of took hold, and so I started to get back into it in 2003. So I've been publishing an issue, at least an issue every year. A few years, two issues. That's pretty much, you know, how I got started. But I know Dennis was a big help, and some of the other editors in helping me get started. Yes.
Darren, you said that you decided to do this. Can you help us out with what the decision process was? What were you thinking about? What were your inspirations? What were the things that made you want to do it? I mean, I know you decided.
Yeah. I guess I liked Howard, liked reading about him, liked writing about him, and I just want to get more involved. And I saw there were other fanzines out there, and so I wanted to be a part of fandom, be a part of that activity, and so that's pretty much what prompted me to do that, and maybe spread the word about Howard to other people. I know originally the magazine started out, obviously I want to give it some kind of a slant or something. I pretty much modeled it for the new fan, is kind of the, you know, is what initially it started out as. I was trying to look for an angle, I guess. Maybe the other fanzines weren't hitting or something, kind of so I would stand out from the crowd. Yeah.
Is it hard to put together enough articles to decide that now it's time to put out the fanzine? Where you didn't want to have a real schedule on how many to put out a year, or how to put out one in a year and have enough material to work with?
No, it wasn't that hard, really. In the early, you know, I had a lot of contributions, and people wanted to write for it. I still have people that want to write for it. And if I had the time and the money, I'd probably do it more often. I think I wouldn't have trouble coming up with material, even though some people think everything's been written about them. There's one of the REHupans mentioned recently in REHupa that, you know, my fanzine was running out of gas, basically. So which I don't agree with them. I think there's plenty of material out there and plenty of Howard to be talked about and discovered and written about. So I don't think we're anywhere near coming to an end of, you know, everything that can be written about Howard's been written. I've heard that before.
I
So-
think the Robert E. Howard Foundation is carrying on that tradition as far as we're discovering, and we, I say we, but the membership too, we're discovering all kinds of unknown stuff about Robert E. Howard. We have, through the work of Mr. Paul Herman, we think may have located Robert E. Howard's real typewriter. Paul has located Howard's writing desk, and Rob Ream is doing tons of work regarding just going through old newspapers from Brownwood and Cross Plains and the entire area, finding all kinds of information about Howard, and actually things that had been written by Howard that were, we thought they were lost forever, but so it's an ongoing process, and through the focus of fanzines towards, Howard fandom and the people generating the interest, we've come to, well, it's one of the things that supports the Robert E. Howard Days. The interest is there and it's growing.
And having his original words and collected letters and things like that help a lot too, because you can be reading a paragraph and you'll think, oh my God, that would make a great article.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
That's what happened on the blog a lot of times.
Yeah.
On the Two Gun Raconteur blog, which as Lee mentioned, an electronic, version of fanzines is coming out, and of course blogs are kind of a form of that, where you have articles and essays online that are posted, different websites almost daily. So there's a lot of stuff online too. Yep. I'm sorry.
That brings up a pretty good point. You blog now, getting the word out about submitting articles. That's pretty easy now. How did you guys in the beginning? How did you spread the word? What was the vehicle that you had to get artists and writers and contributors involved? There was no internet. What was it?
Letters, a lot of letters. Corresponded by letter, because back then long distance was even pretty pricey. So you would basically have to write somebody, then wait for a response, and then maybe write back, and so.
Well, I mean, how did you find each other though? I mean,
from the early days was obviously you had a copy of the person's magazine, and there's an address in there. Like I wrote to Dennis and Byron and Wayne Warfield and different people, and I would ask them for addresses. I would say, who would you think would be interested in contributing to my magazine? What about this artist or that artist? Do you have their address? And they would give me the information, and I would contact them directly.
A lot of fanzines that I found from comic books, where they used to have ads in the backs of comic books where so-and-so was, so they were a comic book salesman, but they also would branch out and deal with other magazines and fanzines and all that. And it's through that networking, the Comics Buyer's Guide I always found was a great place to find old fanzines, and it just, you kind of had to know where to look. But once you got that, once you got that in motion, then it became a lot easier. But yeah, it was tough. It was tough to find people because you didn't know their phone number, you didn't know who was doing what, and until you had a copy of a fanzine, you really weren't aware of its existence.